It's the most wonderful time of the year when we can all gather together in the Christmas spirit and finally admit that we like watching Hallmark movies. Admit it, something inside of you enjoys watching these terrible tropes played over and over and over again. I will be the first to admit I've seen my fair share of Lifetime Christmas movies. None of them are good. None of them are terrible either. Except one. And I don't know if I've been watching too much Jenny Nicholson or if this is really an opinion that has just struck me in my soul. But I cannot go another moment without ripping apart Holiday Switch. This should go without saying, but there will be spoilers if you care about that kind of thing. I mean, it is a Lifetime movie, so there's only so many different directions it can go. So if you are just dying to watch Holiday Switch and it's on your list and you haven't gotten there yet, maybe save this video for after. Holiday Switch is a story about a suburban mom with 2 kids and a husband who doesn't make enough money and she's unsatisfied in her life. She's wisting after this high school boyfriend that she had, who is now this huge, successful millionaire of an art dealer, somehow, who has a beautiful wife, and they travel and do all of these amazing things together, and she's just filled with jealousy. Somehow her life is switched into this life if she had married high school boyfriend, rich guy, instead of high school boyfriend, poor guy. Shenanigans ensue until finally she realizes she wants to go back to her old life, and the movie ends with her and her original family happily ever after. Sort of? Now, before we start breaking down the story, because there is a lot to unpack there, I'd really like to nitpick a few things. Honestly, I was just filled with joy when the movie opened up and the song that was playing was an iteration of Jingle Bells, but stylized to sound like I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas. Complete with the ba-ba-bums and the high falsetto voice singing over the regular melody. So good. There's also a part in the movie where things kind of get mystical and magical, and what plays over that is tinkly bells that sound suspiciously but not quite like the Home Alone theme song. These copyright-avoiding songs that still call to mind the song that you want to hear without actually playing it are honestly amazing. Also, the rich character's last name is Kensington, which I do feel the need to make fun of. I just have to get one thing out of the way. This is my only critique of anybody's looks in the movie, because honestly, people are pretty much cast to be what they are, and it's fine. But I was honestly distracted by how much the 2 male actors act with their teeth. The main character's husband, Gary, is one of those dudes that has just a big, I don't know how to describe it, but he acts with all of his teeth. Like when he says things, he kind of says it like this, like to the point where it's distracting. Maybe I'm just a bad person, I don't know. But let's dig into the story. So the movie opens up with this knockoff song playing and a little girl's hands making homemade ornaments. And you find out she's making homemade ornaments because they can't afford Christmas decorations. They're very poor, they're behind on their bills, they have credit cards that are due. She is talking with her sister about the spirit of Christmas, and he makes jokes. He refers to it as the Ferguson family tradition. He's obviously playing a silly but lovable character. While from the other room, you can hear the main character, Paula, just yelling and screaming for her husband because she's the only one that does anything in this house, and where are the Christmas lights? They're the only ones on the block without Christmas lights up. So the viewer's first impression of her is not a positive one. We think that she's mean. We think that she's sulky. And this is only further reinforced by the fact that Gary, her husband, goes down after making jokes with the kids and tries to help her. And the whole time he's helping her, she is ripping him to shreds. Pretty much just because they're poor. This whole time they're arguing in the basement, she is wearing this obviously disheveled outfit. She hasn't done her hair, doesn't look like she has makeup on, she has on an oversized shirt and I think like pajama pants. Like they're really going hard at this unhappy housewife angle. So she rips her husband a new one, he leaves to take the kids to school, she goes back in the house and pulls out all of her art supplies, which is apparently like a passion she used to have. And it goes through this whole process where she pulls out these paint supplies and clearly she thinks that she's gonna start painting again right now out of the blue. And all these debt collectors keep calling, and so she's talking to these debtors for what seems like hours because honestly the scene is so long. And again, the whole point of the scene is to push that they are so stinking poor and so stinking in debt that they cannot function. So instead of doing art, because she's too busy being poor, she goes upstairs and pulls out like her old art portfolio where she flips through some super different paintings. Like seriously, none of them have anything in common other than they're just art. It looks like she went to an art class and did pretty well. And just kind of like, hums and haws over these old pieces of art, like she wishes that she could still have these hobbies. And at this point, my husband and I look at each other and we're like, really? The teenager is angsty for the sake of being angsty, which is fine, but the little girl is nice. In later scenes, you even see this problem teenage daughter, and she's like reading quietly on the couch by herself. Like, they're not bad kids. They're clearly set up to be the kind of kids you want in a Christmas show. I honestly don't know how she could not be an artist, because two well-behaved kids do not stop you from following your dreams. I have two well-behaved kids, and look at me continue my hobbies. This apparently triggers some kind of trip down memory lane where she starts to wish that she had picked Nick instead of Gary in high school. We find this out because there are newspaper clippings that she has collected clearly over the years about this Nick Kensington that she dated, and like all of his accomplishments and all of his life, like creepster level newspaper clippings about this dude. She takes their crappy car, which I'm sure is crappy to illustrate how poor they are. She drives to Nick's mansion, which, I mean, it's a big house, but whatever. Then she goes out on the town for who knows why, because I don't think she comes in with groceries or anything. And she ends up in this awkward situation where she sees Nick, but she hides because she's poor, so she can't talk to him. But shenanigans ensue when she pushes her way into a fancy boutique and hides behind a mannequin that has on a $1,200 plus tax dress. And if I can just take a minute here to dump on the boutique, it was one of the least believable parts of the movie. It's set up to be this fancy, like, rich people boutique where there's all these fancy dresses and designer clothes and blah blah blah, but the walls are all white and undecorated. The clothing is smashed together on those, like, racks you see in the back of high school productions because they hold the costumes. There is one lady that works there, and my favorite part, there are fitting rooms in the first place, but the fitting rooms are just like curtains. And I don't know if that's just some kind of like rich person thing that I'm too poor to understand, but usually when you go into fancy places, there's decor on the walls, there's something that proclaims their status, you know, something like that. But no, this place is like this empty boutique that looks like a used clothes store. And I really don't feel like this used clothes store has a $1,200 dress in the display window, but what do I know? Of course, Nick and his wife come into the boutique. She tries to hide. He sees her from the back of her head and instantly recognizes her from her beanie and invites her to his art show at his gallery with a crumpled up piece of paper that looks like it was made for a 4th grade science fair. She yells at Gary some more. They go to the art show. She sees Nick. She even allows herself to be in a situation where she is alone with Nick, which is the kind of position you put yourself in if you're looking for an out and like basically saying you're down to cheat, which I guess Paula kind of is because she's so unhappy. She's humiliated at the art show for some reason. That night she goes and she looks at her kids wistfully, like you can't tell if she's resentful of them or if she's looking at them because she loves them and she thinks that they deserve better. You have no idea because it's not clear. And then she goes in the corner of the hallway and sobs. The next day she finds herself in the basement where previously in the movie, Gary had brought to her their first Christmas ornament as a married couple, and it had fallen to the ground and shattered, and when it shattered it released magic into the air because it made little twinkly magic noises. Apparently nobody cleaned that up because she goes downstairs, and while she's hearing weird voices coming from the washing machine, which is not a good sign, the shattered pieces of the ornament are still just kind of chilling there. And eventually she crawls through the dryer through the magical new life portal in the back of her crappy poor person dryer, and she emerges on the other side with these blue silk pajamas that she does not take off for the rest of the movie, with a maid who is telling her that she's going to be late for her hair appointment with Armando. And it takes our main character Paula a minute to kind of grasp what's going on, and she assumes that it's a dream. Now, instead of doing the normal person thing in a dream, where she gets ready really fast using the clothes that are available to her and then going to the hair appointment she's going to be late to, she spends what I assume is like an hour up in her new rich person bedroom with her new rich person stuff, trying it on like a Barbie fashion show and putting on different kinds of perfume like a teenager when it's their first time at Victoria's Secret, trying on a whole bunch of jewelry. And my ultimate favorite part, she spends a crazy amount of time up on her bed with a framed picture of her and Nick, like spinning around with it and hugging it to her chest and laughing because she's finally got this dream she always wanted. Like, honestly, not even a thought of her family or her husband. No, she's way too excited about this new life. She does not even care. And so she goes on her hair appointment to Armando, and then afterwards she has dinner at the club with the girls, and then her big, like, I can do this now, is she goes to the rich person store and buys the $1,200 plus tax red dress. In this new timeline, we have seen two different versions of Nick. We see the first version of Nick when she first falls out of the dryer and he yells to the maid to tell Paula that he has hired someone to come put Christmas lights on the house. And he sounds very jovial. This sounds like a fun surprise he's going to tell her, something that he would say to his loving wife. And then there's the second version of Nick, which is the one that we see for pretty much the whole rest of the movie. And it's like stoic douchebag Nick, who is painted as a total jerk, who acts like he has no emotion for the rest of the film, which I guess fits with his like holier than thou rich guy art dealer attitude. But Paula is so in love with Nick in this new timeline that she doesn't even notice. The maid keeps saying weird transparent things about how like Mr. Nick is always at the office. He spends so much time at the office. He's very busy with a lot of things. She goes to visit him at work even though he said not to, and the movie sets it up like she's gonna catch him cheating, but really he's just in his office with who in the other timeline is his wife named Sheila. Now, at this point in the movie, Paula has already gone on a shopping spree with this newfound money. She has booked tickets for a romantic getaway with Nick to Paris, and she has asked the maid to prepare a sexy dinner for her and Nick. And my biggest beef with this is that she has not even one time thought about her family. She has not mentioned her husband. She has not seemed to regret or miss her old life at all. So we have established that Paula is not a good person. And this kind of comes to a head with her dinner with Nick, where he comes home late from the office at like 7 o'clock, which is not late. And instead of having the romantic dinner she imagined, instead of dancing with Nick because she loves to dance, instead he sits her down and tells her they're not going on a getaway to Paris because she asked for a divorce a year ago. The papers are signed and it's over. Paula seems shocked by this revelation, which you would think sparks some kind of, I don't know, internal reflection? Something to make her think, what is wrong with me to have made me act like this in this new life? Perhaps I'm supposed to learn a lesson from this dream to make my real life better. But no, that's not what happens. Instead, the next day, she goes to see Nick at the art gallery and she begs for him back. She begs for the husband that she never actually had, who never was actually her husband, to take her back. That is the first thing that she does. That is her reaction to this revelation. She still at no point has mentioned Gary, mentioned her children, mentioned her old life, or even seems to care about it at all. And this to me confirms that Paula as a character is human trash. Because it gets better. Nick rejects her, says that he never stopped loving her. She chose this, and it's her fault. She wasn't satisfied in this life with Nick either. Only after Nick rejects her once and for all does she start to think about her old life and think like, well, maybe it was better. She gets in her car and goes on this insanely long scene where she drives past a bunch of Christmas scenery, but also the car looks like it's on a highway because the lights keep passing at highway speed. It's bad. She drives to her house to go visit Gary, and Gary has married a girl that they went to high school with who was in love with Gary. She goes through the house and she kind of observes their life. They have the same children that she and Gary had. These kids are good. This girl from high school is a good mom to them. She cares about them. And best of all, this woman from high school that ended up marrying Gary because Paula married Nick cares about Gary and sees the positive in Gary, and she compliments him for being creative. And when the creditors call, she brushes them off with a smile and optimism, like everything will be okay because we have what we need. It was at this point in the story that I decided that I had no idea where it was going. It started off wanting to be a mix of A Christmas Carol and It's a Wonderful Life. However, in A Christmas Carol, I almost said Scrooge McDuck, Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by 3 ghosts and they teach him a lesson, and in the end, he learns his lesson about the true meaning of Christmas and is a better man for it. In It's a Wonderful Life, he finds out that things would be a lot worse if he weren't around, and he returns to life renewed with his place in the world. In this movie, Paula has learned nothing but how to act in her own self-interest. She hated the life that she had because she wished that she had money. she got the money and the husband that she wished she had, only to find out that she had ruined it. And then after finding out that she had ruined it, she goes back to this old life that no longer exists and tries to break up her old timeline husband's new timeline marriage so that she can get back with him because it's like a fallback? Like, it's the easy thing to do? And can I point out that at no time has she ever really mentioned missing her children? Like, they don't even come up until she sees Gary again. So after attacking Gary with his new family and his new life, where he seems to be perfectly happy other than a couple errant lines about how he used to love her in high school, she says that he needs to come to her Christmas Eve party, which is also a divorce party because that's the day that her divorce is finalized with Nick. I don't know. Again, this might be some kind of rich person thing that I'm too poor to understand. Should you have divorce parties? It seems weird to have a party with all of your mutual friends when you're celebrating your separation. Whatever. She begs Gary to come and says that she misses their life together. Blah, blah, blah. None of it really makes sense, and honestly, it seems like Gary makes the right decision and rebuffs her. There's even a scene after he rejects her where he starts to dance with this new timeline wife, and they seem perfectly happy. Paula, completely out of character, goes and buys her daughter's dresses anonymously and sends them to her while also buying Gary an expensive drill because he needed a new drill for his business. Then comes the Christmas Eve divorce party. She is sulking upstairs in the same blue pajamas that she never took off in the entire movie, and the loving maid comes up and she gives her some advice on how to mingle with the party guests, and she goes downstairs and mingles, and it honestly kind of seems like she's turned a new leaf. She's ready to accept this new life and move forward in any way she can, because she runs into Sheila, who is now Nick's new flame, even though she was Nick's wife in the old timeline. And she like wishes them every happiness while also doing weird like self-deprecating divorcee humor. I don't know. If I was in that situation, I would feel super awkward about the jokes she was making. But towards the end of the Christmas Eve divorce party, Gary shows up, and what does he bring? Even though it canonically makes no sense, the broken Christmas ornament, which is miraculously repaired. Even though in this timeline it makes no sense, because it was originally their first Christmas ornament as a married couple. He gives it to her and she says, "I hope you didn't spend too much money on this," and he said, "Don't worry, I didn't." Which also begs the question, then where did he get it? Because was it like an heirloom? It's not explained even a little bit. And he says some cheesy line about how "you've been so sad lately, I wanted to make you smile." And then they kiss! Which makes me unspeakably angry. It is so out of character for Gary to cheat on his wife and his happy life for this girl that showed up out of the blue after, I'm assuming, 20 years? In this movie, Paula has only played the part of selfish, unsatisfied homewrecker. She has no redeeming qualities. If this new timeline was going to be the forever timeline, she would have broken up 2 households for her own selfish happiness. In the end, she wakes up back in her regular house with her regular life. She's with Gary again, and they all hug as a loving, happy family, even though it has been established at this point that the teenager is angsty and they have a troubled marriage, and everybody ends up happily ever after, even though nothing changes. So let's break this down. Paula is unsatisfied in her marriage, wishes that she had stayed with her high school boyfriend. This wish for the other life comes true. She ends up with this high school boyfriend where it turns out she was the common denominator in her unhappiness. Instead of realizing this fault and trying to move forward and bettering herself, she breaks up a new family who is completely happy in an attempt to satisfy her own selfish happiness. Even after she is supposed to have learned the lesson that money isn't everything and that we are responsible for our own happiness, while it seems like she has perhaps gone through a change of heart by sending the anonymous gifts, she learns nothing. She has still spent money to buy happiness for this poor family of which she is not a part, and instead of bucking up and deciding to have a fun Christmas Eve divorce party, she spends the whole time sulking and asking if Gary is there. And then, in the end, she forces a good, happy man to cheat on his family and break it apart, only to be rewarded for doing this by going back to her own reality where she's still poor, he's still an unsuccessful goofball, but no, she loves him now because the lesson she learned was that she couldn't have Nick. It's not that she loves him, it's that he's the better option to being alone. And my favorite part about the ending of this movie, the anonymous gifts that she sent as Paula Kensington end up arriving anonymously under their tree branch Christmas tree. So her daughters get new clothes and her husband gets the new drill, implying that in some way this other timeline was actually happening. And the implications of that are crazy. Because she has made nothing but selfish, horrible decisions through the entire movie, and then she's supposed to come back as the triumphant hero that learned her lesson and came back to her family with joy on Christmas. And that is why Holiday Switch is the worst Christmas movie ever made, possibly ever. I may never do this again, stay sweet. Paula Ferguson is trash. And that is why Holiday Switch is the greatest Christmas movie